Hello, and welcome to another lesson from Level Up Mathematics. In today's lesson, we will be generating equivalent forms of fractions, decimals, and percents. So what we'll be doing is converting back and forth from fraction to decimal, decimal to percent, percent to fraction, things like that. So let's start with converting fractions to decimals. So when we're converting from fractions to decimals, there's two ways we can do it. If the denominator is a friendly number, in other words, a number that you can scale up or down to 10 or 100, then you simply scale that number to 10 or 100 and write your decimal from there. If the denominator is not a friendly number, then you're just going to divide the numerator by the denominator. So let's start with the friendly numbers first. Let's say you had 2/5 and you wanted to write that as a decimal. Well, the first thing I notice is 5 will easily scale to 10 if we multiply it by 2. So if I multiply the denominator by 2, I must also multiply the numerator by 2. So 2 times 2 is 4/10. Now, to write 4/10 as a decimal, it would simply be 0.4. So 2/5 easily scaled to 10. So we didn't need to use long division on this problem. Okay. All right, what about 12/50? If I want to write that as a decimal, I could use long division, but I notice that the denominator will easily scale to 100 if I multiply it by 2. So if I multiply the denominator by 2, I must also multiply the numerator by 2. So 12 times 2 would be 24. So 12/50 would be equivalent to 24/100, which in decimal form is written as 0.24. Now, again, if the denominator is not a friendly number, then you're going to have to divide the numerator by the denominator. And we'll do an example of that in just a moment, all right? So in example 1, it's going to give us some fractions, and it's going to ask for the decimal equivalent for each fraction. So remember, you want to look at the denominator first and see if you can scale it to 10 or 100. So if I'm looking at 1/20th, I notice that 20 will easily scale to 100 if I multiply it by 5. 20 times 5 is 100. So if I multiply the denominator by 5, I must also multiply the numerator by 5. 1 times 5 is 5. So 5/100ths would be written as a decimal as 0.05. So we could say that 1/20th is equivalent to 0.05. Our next fraction is 8/25. I notice that my denominator is 25, which will easily scale to 100 if I multiply it by 4. So if I multiply the denominator by 4, I must multiply the numerator by 4. And 8 times 4 would give me 32. So 32/100ths is written in decimal form as 0.32. So the fraction 8/25 is equivalent to 0.32. Now, when I get to 3/8, I have a problem because 8 will not go into 10 evenly, and it will not go into 100 evenly. So this is where we use long division. And we're going to divide the numerator by the denominator. So 8 divided into 3. Now, obviously, 8 will not go into 3, so I'm going to add a couple of zeros. And I'll move my decimal point up. And I say 8 goes into 30 3 times. And 3 times 8 is 24. Subtract and bring down. So 8 goes into 60 7 times. 7 times 8 is 56. Subtract. I'm going to have to add another 0 up here and bring down. So 60 minus 56 is 4. Bring down a 0. 8 goes into 40 5 times. So 3/8 is equivalent to 0.375. 5/4. What is the decimal equivalent? Well, 4 will not go into 10 evenly, but it will go into 100 evenly. So if I multiply that by 25, 4 times 25 is 100. So I must also multiply the 5 times 25, and that gives me 125 over 100. So 125 divided by 100. Remember, when we divide by 100, we move our decimal in 2 places. So our decimal here would be 1.25. All right, 7/8. Now, we already learned in problem C that 8 does not easily scale to 10 or 100. So again, we're going to have to use long division. So I'd like you to pause the video and try problem E on your own. When you're ready to check your answer, press play and come back and see. All right, welcome back. Let's see how you did. Okay, so I said 8 goes into 70. Let's see, 8 times. 8 times 8 is 64. Subtract and bring down. Let's see, 70 minus 64 is 6. Bring down a 0. 8 goes into 67 times. 7 times 8 is 56. Bring down a 4. So bring down a 0, 8 goes into 45 times. So 7/8 is equivalent to 0.875. All right. 12/40. Now, you may think, well, 40 does not go into 100 evenly, but we can scale it down to 10. Here's what I mean. If I have 12/40 and I wanted that denominator to be 10, I could divide by 4. So 40 divided by 4 gives me 10, and 12 divided by 4 gives me 3. So that would be 3/10 or 0.3. Okay. Now, there's another way you could have done this. I've seen people do this. They have 12/40, and then they take half of each number to get 6/20, and then they scale 20 to 100, which they'd have to multiply by 5, and 6 times 5 is 30, so they get 0.30. Same answer. The first way was scaling to 10, the second way scaled to 100, but it worked either way. All right. Now, what about converting percents to fractions? So when you want to convert a percent to a fraction, you simply write the percentage as a fraction with a denominator of 100 and then simplify. So if you had 5%, you would write it as 5 over 100 and then simplify. To simplify this, we'd have to divide the numerator and the denominator by their common factor of 5. So 5 divided by 5 is 1. 100 divided by 5 is 20. So 5% is equivalent to 1/20. All right, 32%. So start off writing it with a denominator of 100 and then simplify that. So if I divide these both by 2, I would get 16 over 50. If I divide them both by 2 again, I would get 8 over 25, and it will not simplify any further. So 32% is equivalent to 8/25. All right, 95 over 100. Now, these numbers are not divisible, both divisible by 2, but they're both divisible by 5. So 95 divided by 5 is 19. 100 divided by 5 is 20. So 95% is equivalent to 19/20. All right, 40%. This would be equivalent to 40 over 100. If I divide those both by 10, I get 4/10. If I divide those both by 2, 2/5. So 40% is equivalent to 2/5. All right, let's talk about converting decimals to percents. When you're converting a decimal to a percent, it can be converted by multiplying by 100 or moving the decimal 2 places to the right. So, for example, 0.95, I would move 2 places to the right to get 95%. For 0.7, I'd go 1, 2, and I'd get 70%. 1.25, 1, 2 places, 125%. All right. In example 3, it says match the following decimals and percents. So what I want you to do is pause the video. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 decimals, and they want you to match each decimal with the equivalent percent. So pause the video. When you're ready to check your answers, press play. All right, welcome back. Let's see how you did. All right, 1.9. If I move my decimal over 2 places, that would be 190%. So that was D. On the next one, if I move my decimal 2 places, that would become 90%. So that was E. 0.09, 2 places to the right, would become 9%, which was F. 0.99, move it over 2 places to get 99%, which was B. 1.09, move 2 places to the right to get 109%, which was A. And then 0.009, move 2 places to the right, and that would give me 0.9%, and that was answer C. All right, example 4. Use your understanding of equivalent forms of numbers to complete the problems below. In problem A, it says an organization raised 145% of its goal. Express this number as a as a decimal and a fraction. So let's start with decimal, because to write this as a decimal, I would just need to move my decimal 2 places to the left. So 1.45. As a fraction, I would write the percentage over 100 and then simplify. So 100 will go into 145 one time with a remainder of 45. So then I just need to reduce 45 over 100. Those will both divide by 5 to get 9/20. So this would be 1 and 9/20 would be my fraction. All right, B. A weather station reported 0.06 inches of rain. Represent this amount as a fraction and a percent. So let me start with percent first, because I just need to move 2 places to the right. So that would give me 6%. As a fraction, I would write it with a denominator of 100 and then reduce. So those will both divide by 2. So that would give me 3/50. All right. In Jada's class, 2/3 of the students have brown eyes. Express this amount as a decimal and a percent. Now, look at your denominator of 3. It will not easily scale to 100, so we're going to have to use long division here. So 3 will go into 20 6 times. 6 times 3 is 18. Subtract and bring down. 3 goes into 20 6 times again. Subtract and bring down. So as you can see, your decimal is repeating. So this would be 0.66 repeating. And as a percentage, if you move your decimal over 2 places, you would have 66 2/3%. All right, a salesperson sold items to 18 out of the last 30 customers who entered a store. What percentage is equivalent to 18 out of 30? Now, 30 will not scale to 100 easily. but we can scale it down to 10 if we divide by 3. So 30 divided by 3 gives us 10. 18 divided by 3 gives us 6. So as a decimal, that would be 0.6. And as a percent, I would move it 2 places to the right to get 60%. All right. E. There is a 1 in 8 chance of a player winning a game. What percentage is equivalent to 1 in 8? So our fraction is 1/8, which does not scale easily to 10 or 100, so I'm going to have to use long division. So I'm going to divide 8 into 1. 8 goes into 10 one time. 10 minus 8 is 2. Bring down the 0. 8 goes into 20 2 times. Subtract and bring down. 8 goes into 40 5 times. So our decimal is 0.125. But they asked for a percent. So we must move our decimal 2 places to the right to get 12.5%. All right, F. A company spent 36% of its annual budget developing a new machine. What fraction of the company's budget was spent developing the new machine? So recall, to write a percent as a fraction, we simply write it with a denominator of 100 and then simplify. So these will both divide by 2 to get 18 out of 50. I believe I could divide by 2 again to get 9 out of 25. 9 over 25 will not simplify any further. So this would be, our equivalent fraction would be 9/25. And that concludes today's lesson, generating equivalent forms of fractions, decimals, and percents.